I hope you're behaving. But just want to jump into things. Again, starting off thinking about you guys, praying for you guys. I miss seeing all of you. I love you guys. If any of you want to talk or need someone or just need to communicate with someone, please feel free to give me a call. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to be able to chat with you guys and just be able to encourage you guys. Now, last week, we jumped into, when I came and I was talking with you guys, we introduced the idea of that we're going to need to rebuild when the quarantine is done, when we're getting out, we're kind of back out in community and among regular people again. And we covered some of the things that we can do to help aid in the rebuilding process. Now, this week, I want to talk about the opposition to rebuilding and what our response can be to that. And, we're going to do some more jumping through the book of Nehemiah and kind of digging through that. I know I've been really enjoying going through and studying it. And it's a great book. If you haven't started reading through it, I would recommend take some time to jump right through it. It's not an exceedingly long book, and it's a great read in my opinion. Now, also, too, I want to say a quick disclaimer as we talk about the idea of opposition. I'm not going to be touting any conspiracy theories or any ideas that I have about what the government's doing or society's doing. No, we're not going to worry about that. I'm not going to hash any news articles out with you guys. That's not the point of today. But what I want to go through and discuss is, kind of what can we do with that. Now, and when we think about the idea of opposition, we need to be realistic in the fact that Christianity has faced opposition since the New Testament. At some point or another, there's been some type of opposition that we've dealt with. Sometimes it's been incredibly hostile. Sometimes it's not been that much. Maybe it's been something simple. Maybe some of you have experienced where it's maybe some snide remarks or some jokes made about your faith. But it hasn't been that much. But then on other parts of the globe, we see that our brothers and sisters in Christ are martyrs for their faith. So there's opposition going on. It's not like, we're this new thing or how people may feel about Christians is going to be, oh man, we've never had this. It's been around. But I went through and I have 3 things, because I love doing threes with my lessons and devotionals, 3 things that we can do when it comes to facing opposition. So the first thing that we can do with facing opposition is we can lean on God. That's what you can do. You can lean on God. And if we jump in, if we look at the beginning of Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, it says this. Now when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews. And he said in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubble and burned ones at that?" Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, "Yes, what they are building, if a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall." So they start off and they're mocking them. They're mocked and tormented. And Sanballat kind of strikes me as one of those guys that's like a typical bully. He's going through and mocking and trying to distract and pull you away from what you're trying to do. And now, here's the thing, though, is he's not just simply mocking the Jews with the intent to just be a pain and a distraction. He's also mocking them with the hopeful intent that his allies are going to join him in coming up against the Jews and stopping them from what they're doing. Because Jerusalem being rebuilt is a threat potentially to them. So, hey, we need to cause some issues with that. But Nehemiah has a great response, and I love how he responds in verse 4. Or actually later on, throughout that, he kind of goes through and he prays, and he talks about it, and he prays a prayer of deliverance. And even with the opposition continuing. Now, verse 14, later on it says, "And I looked and arose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, 'Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome. And fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes.'" Now, as we look at that, I want to look at the phrase, "Remember the Lord who is great and awesome." Now, we don't serve this puny, disengaged God who's just kind of like observing us throughout these circumstances, throughout this pandemic. We don't serve a God who's just kind of like sitting back, watching, like, man, this is better than reality TV. No, God is involved. He is active. And so as things start to wind down, as churches start to open back up, as we start to get back out into the community and start to do that, as we experience the opposition to us, before we go through, before you engage, before anything happens, you need to remember that we need to lean on God. Don't turn tail and run away, but lean back on Him and realize and trust Him to protect you through the opposition. Now again, to the opposition that we deal with at this point now, and I see some people talking about as we broach the idea of opening back up and kind of getting back in there, some people are like, wait a minute, what's wrong? Do you not care about lives? Well, we'll get to that. We do care, and we'll kind of move through that. So the first thing is, as we deal with the opposition, the first thing that we can do is we can lean on God. Don't try and act on your own understanding of how to handle people. Can be praying, and we talked about prayer last week as one of the things that we needed to do as we got ready to rebuild. We need continue with that, and we need to lean on God and trust Him. So that's the first thing. The next thing that you can do as we face opposition to help you face it is to stand firm. Now, next point I have, this one is actually from the previous verse, verse 13. I pulled a dirty pastor trick. Obviously, I've been learning from Toby and watching him and everything, so we pulled a dirty pastor trick. So we look at chapter 4, verse 13, and it says this. So in the lowest parts of the space, behind the wall, in open places, I stationed the people by their clans with their swords, their spears, and their bows. So Nehemiah responds. He goes through and he responds to this threat of opposition, and he takes action about it. He doesn't just go through and say, oh man, well guys, we better hide out because who knows what's going to happen. Let's go through, let's hide out, guys, and just wait till this all blows over and be done with it. No, he says no, and he stations the soldiers, he prepares them, he sets a guard and is readied. And there's nothing wrong with preparing yourself against opposition. We're not called to be wimps as Christians. There's nowhere in the Bible that says that. We're called to be meek. But there's a difference between being meek and being a wimp. A great definition, and I can't remember who said it, is meekness is not weakness, it is power under control. So we don't need to just roll over when we experience opposition to our faith. We look at apologetics. Apologetics is a defense of our faith, preparing for opposition. Now, and as we get ready to rebuild, as we get ready to get back out into the community, we should acknowledge that some people may not agree with what we want to do. Some people may say like, oh man, you Christians don't care about lives. Why are you opening up and having people in? What's wrong? Why would you do that? No. Or some people will be like, oh man, well God won't fix anything. We're going to be the ones to fix it. So we should prepare to stand firm as we get to work. Now, it may be a bumpy ride, but we don't know exactly what the response will be. But we should acknowledge the fact that it's going to be there. So that brings us to our next one. So again, the first thing that we need to do is lean on God. Next one again is we need to stand firm. Don't just run away from the opposition. And the third thing that we should do is we need to continue to work. Verse 15 of chapter 4 says, when our enemies heard that it was known to us that God had frustrated their plan, we all returned to the wall, each to his work. So the threat against them is over, and they say, okay, so they return to their work. Now, here's the thing, they're still ready for action. If we look at the following verses, they're still, we're talking about that they're, working with one hand and have their weapon in the other. They're ready and prepared, just as we should be. So we should continue to work. Even with the fact the enemy's breathing down their neck, they're there, they continue to work. And that's the same thing. If we stop serving God because of fear, when is the work going to be done? What will be done? Even, here's the thing. Throughout history, we see that there are people who, even in the face of danger, continue to serve God. Now, if we look at it, Corrie ten Boom is somebody that came to mind as I was going through and studying and preparing. But she goes through and she believed, she went through and she hid the Jews because she believed that God wanted her to. Now before you say, whoa, wait a minute, are you equating that what we're dealing with right now is like, no, I'm not equating that at all. But I'm saying that we've seen people who are in a greater face of danger still went to serve God. Now here's the thing, we might be stuck at home. Like, well, how much work can I do? Well, maybe you can start going through and start laying the groundwork for rebuilding. We talked about getting in touch with neighbors last week. Same thing, maybe you should drop a card or something to your neighbors. Some of you have been going crazy with baking, maybe some baked goods and everything, and leave it on their porch. I don't know if they'll eat it or not, but something like that, or going through your contacts list and going through and calling all the people that you can and saying, hey, what can I do? How can I pray for you? And encouraging them. I know right now I've been going crazy not being able to actually see the teens and teach the teens in the youth group setting typically. It's very odd to be a youth pastor right now. But here's the thing, I'm trying to lay the groundwork and everything that I can to prepare for when I can eventually see them face to face. I'm trying to do what I can to mentor now, and work with what I can as I continue to get towards being able to get out and continue to rebuild. So there's still ways that we can connect and encourage and continue to work. Now, as we kind of tie things up in the little devotional, again, the things that we can prepare as we face opposition, just in review, is again, we can lean on God. Remember that God is in control throughout the situations, throughout whatever people may say to us. God is still in control. He still loves us and still is watching over us. Again, and then also too, we stand firm. Don't just turn tail and run away. Because again, we know, we have work to do. We shouldn't be afraid. And then the third thing, again, continue to work as we stand firm. Continue to work towards that. Continue to serve. Continue to pray. Continue to minister the best that you can right now. And then continue to build on that when you're out and about. And as we kind of tie things up, I want to point out something else that we look at. Nehemiah is not like a prophet. He's not a king or a judge. He's not this bigwig. He's a Jewish captive. He was like a cupbearer. He wasn't some fancy high-ranking person. He was, in a sense, a nobody. But God goes through and utilizes him in this great way of rebuilding Jerusalem. And here's the thing.
Really sorry.
What?
Tell everybody that we know about the bit that there's some visual. Just saying.
Oh.
We think we got it fixed.
Apparently there's been a bit of an audio-visual issue, guys. We are aware of it. We think it's been fixed.
Audio is fine.
The audio is fine. The visuals apparently all kinds of crazy. But we are aware of the problem. Now, as we can think about, as we face opposition, Mike's right there. As we face the opposition, though, kind of in closing, you're not just a nobody. Each of you has value as important. One of the things that kind of came up as I was studying is 1 Timothy. Chapter 6, verse 7 came to me and kind of looking at it. It says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." Now, each one of you that is watching right now, you are unique and special, and you have a role to play. And God can utilize you in ministering. Now, kind of going through and we need to let go of that fear of worry of this opposition. Kind of going back, and I mentioned Corrie ten Boom in one of the books about her, Tramp for the Lord, which is a pretty catchy title. Definitely caught my eye when I saw it. She says this. She says, "Whether I am walking in the bright light of his presence or abiding under the shadow of the Almighty, I know that he is not only with me, he is in me." That's page 63 of the book, if you would like to pick it up and then find that quote. But right now, that regardless of what is happening, God is still in control. And I'll remind you of that every time I come back and share these devotionals with you guys. I'm going to remind you of that. Because I think that, it's something that I've been needing to continue to tell myself, and I'll help remind you guys of that. Now, as we continue to go towards rebuilding, hang on to that truth. But thank you guys for tuning in. I love you guys. I miss you guys. I look forward to being able to see you guys.
Another thing with Nehemiah, I'm very, very sorry to have interrupted and interrupted his flow of thought, but I know a lot of you were having trouble with the video feed, and there was a button we hadn't pushed, and we finally pushed it, so I hope you're able to at least see the last half of this, and I'm glad the audio was working just fine all the way through, so at least you got to hear what was being said. But I just wanted to hop on here and give you two reminders. Number one, don't forget about our blood drive, May 19th. For the Red Cross. If you want to donate blood, you need to call them and make an appointment. The number is 1-800-RED-CROSS. Not super, probably kind of obvious, but it doesn't hurt to say it. The website is redcrossblood.org, and you can usually make an appointment there, no problem. Second thing I want to let you know about. A lot of you probably have noticed that our region has been given the authorization by Governor Cuomo to begin a very slow reopen for a lot of the businesses and so on that are out there. Obviously, there's multiple phases, and different companies and different businesses and different kinds of businesses are going to be free to open up at different levels of that plan. But there is a reopen starting to happen. The governor is already talking about the fact that we're going to start moving towards going back to a lot of the activity that we had before all this. I want you to know, so that nobody's panicking, nobody's nervous, nobody's wondering what's happening. The leadership team here at the church, the staff and the deacons, we've already begun to start to think about the process of what it would require, what it would take, what it would look like should we decide as a church that it's time in the next few weeks for us to reopen. And we will be giving you all the opportunity to know all that information way ahead of time so that you're prepared for it. As we develop plans, we will be very transparent and let you know about it. Here's something, though, that I would like to ask each one of you that are watching me here. We would love to know, as a leadership team, as a staff, kind of how our congregation feels about it. Because, to be honest with you, there's a lot of us that see this whole thing very differently, right? We're not all on the same page. We don't all have the exact same experience. And honestly, we don't all have the same risk factor when it comes to being vulnerable to this particular virus. And so we don't want to assume that everybody is all on board with everything the way we would imagine it. We would love to get some feedback and some input from all of you. So many of you, we've been trying really hard to stay in touch with you throughout this whole crisis. We've had deacons calling, life group leaders calling, just to touch base, check in with you, see how you're doing. Over the next few days, you're going to be getting another phone call from your deacon or a phone call from your life group leader, just to kind of touch base with how you're doing. And one of the questions they're going to ask you is just your personal feelings about whether or not you and your family would be participating in some kind of a reopen. Now, the reopen that we're thinking about and discussing is not a 0 to 60 start. It's not, we've been completely shut down for 8 weeks and now we're going to ramp everything back up to the way it used to be. We're probably going to start small with some small part of our programming and then add this gradually as we go. We got to warm up the engine before we get the car out on the highway. So if we were to start in the next few weeks with a gradual reopen, how would you feel about it? Would you want to participate? Would you bring your family? Is it something that you would want to do, or do you feel like it's still premature? Is it still too soon? We want input, we want information from our church family, and we really feel like you are in a great position to help us out. So when you get that phone call, please call the person back if it goes to your voicemail. If you get them on the phone and you see it's ringing and it's your deacon, don't just let it go to voicemail. Pick it up. Talk to them. They really would love your input in helping us to figure out what form reopening is going to take. I don't know about you, I'm encouraged to see that there's at least the wheels are starting to turn. The momentum at some point is going to catch up to us, and we're going to be able to get back to doing a lot of the things we love to do around here. But we want to be wise. We want to be careful. We want to be respectful. And so we're reaching out to local government. We're reaching out to you guys. We want your feedback. So take a couple of minutes when your deacon calls you or your life group leader just to share your 2 cents. And they will pass that information along to us at the church office this, and together we're going to try to come up with a plan. Once we come up with a plan that we think works for our congregation, we will notify you either on one of these daily updates, or we will send out a message to let you know there's going to be a special update of this to make sure you know exactly what's happening. We don't want to catch anybody off guard with this, and we want to give everybody an opportunity to express what they feel and what they think. We kind of think congregational church government means that that's a good thing to do. So we would love to hear from you. Please let us know. If you can not all try to call the church office at the same time, that'd be helpful. Wait for your deacon to call you, contact your deacon, or contact your life group leader. That would just make it a lot more streamlined as far as how we get the information. But thanks again for tuning in today. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning. And please let us know what you're thinking about this when somebody calls you this week or early next week, and we'll be as open as we can be as we try to figure all this thing out. And again, thank you for your time. May the Lord bless you. Let me just pray with you, and then we'll send you on your way. Father God, thank you so much for this reminder from the story of Nehemiah that we do matter, that we have a part to play, that we don't need to be afraid of all those who oppose what you want to do. I pray, God, that you would just work in our church, work in each life. Help us, Lord, as we try to think about the future, and we want to keep growing, and we want to keep reaching out with the love of Jesus. Lord, we know we can't just shut down our ministry, and we can't just end it forever. So give us wisdom to know how to go about the process of opening up a little bit and reaching out to people and continuing to do the mission you've called us here to do. Thank you, God, so much for all of these brothers and sisters of mine that I'm praying for and praying toward them in their direction. I pray, God, you would just comfort them, help them meet every need that they have, and help them to find somebody that they can turn around and bless as well. Thank you so much, God, for this opportunity to be with them. Please comfort and encourage us as we seek to serve you today. And I ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, everybody. May the Lord bless you. We'll be in touch really soon. See you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.